an urgent priority.
Rising cost of insulin.
One of the most expensive liquids in America.
Huge price hikes.
Barely surviving because they can't get insulin.
It's our oxygen, it's our water.
We wouldn't last a day without it.
Way out of whack, it's way too high.
Somebody's got to step in. The government's not helping us do anything.
People are sick and tired of the greed of the pharmaceutical industry.
I'm not really a crier that much, sorry.
The price of insulin in the United States has risen to an unprecedented level. Insulin is necessary for the body to perform its most basic functions, including maintaining blood sugar levels and storing excess glucose for energy. Diabetic patients either don't produce enough insulin or don't respond to it as well as they should. Thus, diabetic patients are highly dependent on their insulin medications. 100 million Americans are now living with diabetes or prediabetes, giving pharmacies a lot of leverage.
For patients with type 1 diabetes, they cannot live without insulin. It is not, they depend on insulin to survive. Some of them, is that they might use as little to be able to function, but then they don't have their diabetes well controlled, so then the risk of complications is still pretty high. They have eye complications, kidney complications, but it is that important. A patient with a type 1 diabetes, they cannot live without insulin sometimes not even for more than a day or two.
To gain a perspective on the effects of the insulin crisis on diabetic patients, we interviewed a few professionals for their opinion.
This is Dr. Konda Reddy. I'm a pediatric endocrinologist and a diabetes specialist. I'm working in Advent Health Children's Hospital in Walt Disney, and also I'm a professor in University of Central Florida and medical school.
Pamela Bossy. I am the pharmacy manager here at CVS.
There is Dr. Arindam Bandyopadhyay. I'm I'm an endocrinologist, a diabetes and specialist in metabolic and hormonal disorders.
What is the importance of insulin in the body?
Insulin, is very important for the carbohydrate metabolism. That's also known as glucose metabolism, and also it's crucial for fatty acid synthesis, and it's very crucial hormone for body anabolism. So that means it's play a role for protein, fat, and carbohydrates metabolism.
What is your work experience with diabetic patients?
Diabetes itself is a chronic disease. There is no cure for this diabetes. So that means there is a need. They need not only just medical management. A lot of social issues. Issues at school, and there's dietary modifications, social problems. It affects the psychosocial issues too. That's why it is a chronic disease. It is a magnitude of problem in this country and all over the world.
Have any of your patients struggled to afford insulin? If so, how did they deal with it?
Yes, generally depending on what type of medication it is, we look for either manufacturer coupons or just discount cards that can help lower the cost.
There's plenty of patients who have problems affording insulin. Well, let me put it this way. So we try to help them out. We try to give them less costly medicines, and sometimes we try to substitute insulin with other medicines, which is affordable. Unfortunately, there are patients who do need insulin, and we give samples to them. But it's a chronic disease like lung disease. You cannot run on samples.
Who do you think is responsible for the rising price of insulin?
The pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies are the ones that kind of set the prices. So I have no way of, dealing with the prices.
How does it make you feel given that you are unable to regulate the price of insulin medication?
We feel frustrated. There are frustrations all over. There are articles written, there are, boards decides, and I think they're trying to bring down some insulin prices down internationally in Europe and in America. American prices are actually 2 to 4 times more than what it is in Europe.
What is a possible solution to this crisis so that insulin can be made more accessible to all diabetic patients?
they're going to have to, I don't know what kind of legislation they'll have to pass, but they'll have to pass some type of legislation that can control the prices.
We need to allow them, towards other companies, and rather than to the monopoly of this one or two companies in pharmaceutical industry to provide this diabetes care and insulin. So probably the government has to take initiative, to be more affordable this insulin therapy, and to involve other companies to manufacture this insulin and other recombinant DNA technology to use that to get affordable insulin.
According to the American Diabetes Association, more than 1 in 4 diabetics in the U.S. who need insulin struggle to afford it.
Our government doesn't cap drug prices, so these 3 companies have complete control over the cost of insulin. They're basically an insulin cartel.
If we want to change the rules of the game, somebody's going to have to stand up and say, we really care about this.
Alex Smith died last year because he couldn't afford insulin medication that could have kept him alive.
Can you even imagine what it was like to tell people that your son died at 26 because he struggled to afford the one medicine that created to save his life?
But there is hope. Right now, there could be enough political will to change things. There seems to be momentum. Politicians across the political spectrum have made drug pricing a priority, especially for the 2020 election. Congress is willing to use their power to force pharma companies to explain themselves. But the question is, will Congress use their power to force them to do more?
The power to make a change lies in the hands of the government.
The burden can no longer fall on the shoulders of patients. No one should have to beg for medicine or ration their treatment.
Regardless of who is responsible, action must be taken to put a stop to the rising price of insulin so that diabetic patients can get the treatment they so desperately need.